Hello again, everyone. It's Mr. Most Days Off, and welcome back to the best darn diddly review show. We've got another Simpsons classic for you this week with Krusty Gets Busted, the supposed-to-be season finale of Season 1. But before we get into that production mess, let me introduce you to your co-host with the most, Richie the WIzKid. How are you today, Rich?
As usual, fine and dandy like sour candy. I'm excited about today's show. Definitely excited about this episode. I haven't been soft at all about how I feel like this is the best episode of the first season. And even though
Spoiler alert.
I've been saying that for like 4 weeks. And I think it did live up to the hype in my mind after I rewatched it after all these years. But we'll get into that. I'll go ahead and throw it back to you, the man, the myth, the maiden fair. It is Miles.
So this week's episode is definitely one of the best in the season, and that's why not only was it supposed to be the finale, but due to the production error with episode 1 that put it towards the end of the season, but also just along with the fact that this is such a good episode, we thought it'd be more fun to talk about it as a solo show. That's why this is going to be a single episode show, and we'll get back to our 2 episodes per podcast starting up again next week with season 2. But Krusty Gets Busted, which aired on April 29th, 1990, is definitely at the top tier of the episode list. And a big part of the reason why is due to the fact that the family is already fleshed out at this point. We already know who they are. We don't have to have it slowly explain that Homer's a buffoon, or that Marge is a patient wife that does have her line, or that the kids are kids that fucking love Krusty the Clown. These things are already established right off the bat whenever the episode opens.
Yeah, that's always a good thing with the show, when you finally start hitting that stride where the characters can just be who they're supposed to be, and then the comedy can come from those situations. That's one of the reasons I agree with you why this is my favorite episode of the season, especially the Bart and Lisa dynamic. When Bart and Lisa team up in The Simpsons, they're such a formidable duo when they actually have a common goal and they're trying to do it together, and more so than Lisa with Bart. When Bart actually wholeheartedly cares about something like he does in this episode, he actually has that small spark of genius that he's not typically known for. But he is a Simpson. He's related to a really smart Simpson, so it makes sense that he should have a little bit of that inside of him every now and then.
Yeah, Bart's kind of almost got the ultimate street smarts. He's not ever going to have an A on the math test or the reading test or any test, but when it comes to making his way through life, he always kind of sometimes he seems to almost have inside information.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you add that with Lisa and how smart she is and can help Bart along, like I said, they're a pretty formidable duo.
Dude, it's like whenever you're playing the arcade game and you do the team-ups, they have the best team-up when they both grab the jump rope and they're bopping around the screen and everything. That's the absolute best. Honestly, the one with Bart on Homer's shoulders is super disappointing.
Yeah, you think that would be the most fun one to do, but never quite packs the punch that you want it to.
No, it's Bart and Lisa all the way. That's the way it should go. But yeah, so this episode opens up. We do have the opening credits. We've got the chalkboard scene. They are laughing at me, not with me. The couch gag is Maggie pops up into the air and then Marge catches her before the show begins. And then this episode also, I wanted to point out, properly introduces, as IMDb put it, several characters to us that we've technically may have seen, but they have not been fleshed out as we've talked about. Some of those characters include Sideshow Bob, Kent Brockman, who has previously, I believe, been just an unidentified anchor. Potentially he had the wrong name at some point, but he is now officially Kent Brockman. We also have Scott Christian, who is a character that made me say, who? Turns out he's another newscaster that I just frankly do not have any recollection of whatsoever. Is this a character that rang a bell with you? Was I supposed to recognize this character and I'm just dumb?
No, you weren't. I'm pretty sure you'll probably never hear that name again.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised to hear it said properly introduced Scott Christian. I'd never heard that before, so maybe IMDb was just being smarky. I don't know. We also got Judge Snyder, who will make several more appearances on the show, and of course a better fleshed out Krusty the Clown. Complete with his own show and sidekick, Sideshow Bob. That's how the show opens. We get a glimpse of the kids watching the Krusty the Clown show, where you see a very energetic Krusty shooting a very disgruntled looking Sideshow Bob out of a cannon for what seems like not the first time.
And it definitely leads to a line I used multiple times in my life, and I still use, and something the Simpsons will always use, which is Krusty and all the kids saying at the same time, "I didn't do it."
Yeah, yeah, that was a great moment in the early part of the show for sure. Right off the bat, I really like the fact that like Krusty's leading into a chant of like, "How much do you love me, kids?" And it concludes all the way to the point where like, "What if they took me away from you?" And all the kids chant, "We'd kill ourselves." And some pretty dark shit, but pretty funny.
It's showing you the love the kids have, and it shows the relationship between Krusty and the kids, which is the biggest important item in this episode.
Yeah, in particular, one boy's love of Krusty, which ends up saving the day. Aww.
Oh, then immediately after that, we get a longer look at Itchy and Scratchy, too, didn't we?
We did. We got a more fleshed out version of Itchy and Scratchy. I believe, I could be wrong on this one. I should know since we've just watched all these episodes, but I believe this is the first time we actually got the Itchy and Scratchy theme song.
Well, my complete guide to the Simpsons handbook here writes out the entire Itchy and Scratchy theme song, so I believe that you are correct in that.
It makes sense, right? I don't see why they'd put the lyrics there if it wasn't for that sake. But yeah, so that was my thought. I also thought it was kind of interesting here that we get a grumble from Marge who talks about the senseless violence, and we know that is foreshadowing for another episode that we will be getting to actually not too long from now. Episodes pretty quickly coming along in season 2.
It's one of the first notes I wrote down. Definitely the longest note I wrote down at the beginning was Marge talking about the senseless violence, and that it's a prelude to her war on cartoon violence in the future season. But I believe you're right. I think that is season 2.
So anyway, we've discovered Marge gets a phone call from her sisters that they are going to be coming and showing their slides from their Mexican vacation. She calls up Homer to stop and pick up some ice cream for the sisters, which that's actually how Homer finds out is kind of funny because he's like, "Why do we need so much?" And that's when Marge reveals that her sisters are coming over.
He was so excited for the ice cream for just a split second.
And then it instantly got ruined. I also feel like this introduces a more fleshed out Apu. This is the first time that I felt like Apu is really Apu, because we get the part where he says, "I've never seen you so sad when buying so much ice cream." We also get, immediately after this, we see a man who looks a lot like Krusty with a black bandit eyeshadow on, oddly enough, who actually starts to rob Apu right in front of Homer. And this is where Apu really made me laugh. Whenever supposedly Krusty said, "Put the money in the bag," Apu said, yes, I know the procedure for armed robbery. I do work in a convenience store." And then almost immediately after Homer had cowered and dove into a display of potato chips at the side of a gun, he emerged after the clown had already left, and Apu was like, "Don't worry, the time for you, or the opportunity for you to prove yourself a hero is long gone." These little blips of Apu that really made me laugh.
Something that I wrote down about this scene is, if you haven't ever seen the episode before, I can't believe you, especially if you're listening to a Simpsons review podcast.
Yeah, don't turn it off, but like seriously, did you tune in by mistake? Like, did you think this was a South Park show?
We all know who did this, and the thing that I've always seen in someone's trailer towards the end, where you can see different costume pieces, where it would be, you could understand how they could pull this off by looking like Krusty, but at the same time, it's Krusty with the freaking mask on. Like, it's so... How did they get this convincing of a costume on them?
That's true. Their body shapes are really not that similar.
Yeah.
In fact, in a scene coming up very soon, it's remarkable to me how similar Homer and Krusty look to each other.
Yeah, and they have episodes about that in the future that are fantastic. Yep. But yeah, it's... the costume bothered me because I'm like, it's such a good job of turning into Krusty that it seems impossible to do that. And also the brief moment right before that where Homer's looking at all the different flavors. It always makes me laugh when he's reading the chocolate flavors. He says, "Ooh, double chocolate," and then he gets super excited and goes, "Oh, new flavor, triple chocolate!" Like, absolutely, that gets me every time.
Definitely. So, needless to say, because you've probably seen this episode, but Homer is now a witness to the robbery of the Quickie Mart. And he basically, by his description to the cops, identifies Krusty the Clown, his son's idol and hero, as the thief. There's a point where Homer is called into the police station and he has to pick out from a lineup from a bunch of clowns, and he just can't stop laughing, and it kills me when he's like, "Well, if the crime is making me laugh, they're all guilty."
And they're just all like sad clowns.
Yeah. But he does in fact point out none other than Krusty the Clown. And that's where we get the supposed introduction of Scott Christian, who I have never heard of, and then immediately after, Kent Brockman reporting the news of the clown killer, or I'm sorry, the clown bandit. Excuse me, he wouldn't kill anyone. There was a brief moment on the commercial as well that made me laugh, that there was a advert for Guns Magazine, and one of the things on the cover was the Magnum Clown Stopper.
That's what I was just about to say. Yeah, it's a magazine with a poo on the cover holding a Magnum, and it says Magnum the Clown Stopper, and I could not stop laughing at that.
Oh, yeah. That's really funny stuff.
When Krusty was getting arrested by the SWAT team and Chief Wiggum, I actually wrote down, I think Krusty could actually get off just based on the scene alone, because Chief Wiggum only says you have the right to remain silent, and then he just says blah, 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 blah. He doesn't read him his Miranda rights, so I'm
It's like 21 Jump Street when the guy can't memorize his Miranda rights.
That's what it made me think of, so I think that Krusty could get off on this.
I feel like maybe, but I don't know if that's going to be addressed in the Simpsons universe.
Well, back in the 90s, you could do whatever you want. I guess technically today, a lot of bad cops can still do whatever they want.
So the moral of the story is diabetic lives matter?
Exactly, thank you. At least somebody understands and appreciates.
So we get to a scene where, again, I already pointed out, but Krusty and Homer look identical to each other when Krusty's not wearing makeup. But there's actually a fun little Easter egg in this episode, or right in this scene. Krusty is wearing a prison regulation jumpsuit with the number or lettering combination A113 as his identification. Are you familiar with this whole theory, this A113 thing?
When I first saw it, I thought it might have something to do with the episode numbers or something, but I wasn't sure. I figured there was some kind of meaning behind it, but I didn't look it up.
So it's actually pretty huge. It's something that a lot of people know about, and they started to notice, in particularly with the rise of the fame of the Pixar movies. A113, in this case, this episode was directed by Brad Bird.
The Incredibles.
Who attended Cal Arts College. And turns out there's a ton of nowadays famous animators, almost everyone that works for Pixar, several people that work for Disney, just a lot of people that went to this Cal Arts College and attended this particular animation class, and it just so happened to be in classroom A113. So this pops up everywhere. And I mean, it's the type of thing where now when you're going to be watching movies in the future, you will notice it and you will have this to think. So you're welcome. But it's in almost every Pixar movie. Supposedly, it still has not been found in Monsters, Inc. There are people that say they've seen it, but they have been debunked.
I imagine it's one of the doors or something.
That's what people have said, that it's on one of the doors, but they have not been able to. I was not able to find like a screenshot, and even then it's really tough to say because there's people that argue that they're faked. And anyway, Monsters Inc. is the only controversial one. It's very clearly found in almost every other Pixar movie. It's in every episode of The Simpsons that Brad Bird directed. It's in The Avengers. It's in The Hunger Games. It's in the new Planet of the Apes. It was even in Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol.
Well, Brad Bird directed that.
Well, there you go. Ethan Hawke actually used it as his like escape thing that he called in.
Oh, I didn't realize Ethan Hawke was in that movie.
Yeah, apparently so. So anyway, that's the A113 thing. A113 thing. It's pretty cool. Again, it's one of those things that you'll start to notice it in various movies, and you'll know that all it signifies is they are paying tribute, because they all were so fond of this animation class they took at Cal Arts College that they all decided that they would just kind of tag it in their movies. So and actually Brad Bird was the first person to use it in general. He used it for a short cartoon, Family Dog, on the show Amazing Stories in 1987.
There you go. And of course he's skyrocketed ever since, so it pays to work for The Simpsons.
It does pay to work for The Simpsons. Anyway, moving on back to The Simpsons, we're now in Krusty's trial, where Krusty has now been arrested for the robbery of the Quickie Mart. He's on video doing it. He's been identified by Homer, and things are looking very, very bad for him. There's a moment that really made me laugh whenever they ask Krusty what she pleads, and he announces proudly that he's guilty, and then everybody erupts, and he's finally like, oh, not guilty, sorry, opening night jitters, Your Honor.
Yeah. Just this big smile on his face, guilty, Your Honor.
So while everything is going to shit for Krusty in court, everybody in town except for one, is turning on Krusty. Reverend Lovejoy has called for a ban of Krusty products. They call for a bonfire to burn everything in town.
That was one of my favorite lines, though, when Bart and Homer's exchange, when everyone's burning everything outside. And Bart looks at Homer and says, "You're giving in to mob mentality." And Homer says, "No, I'm not. I'm just jumping on the bandwagon."
Come on, son, get on the winning team.
Like that's
that was really
again,
good.
Homer says something that like no one would ever admit in real life that they're giving into mob mentality. But if if it was all your friends and neighbors and family and they were doing something, you'd go out there and join them probably. And it's like it's another quick little jab at society. I feel like and how most people react.
Oh, it most definitely is, and that's one of those brilliant Simpsons moments that you absolutely
it's
love.
It's a split second, but like it says so much.
It's super impactful.
Yeah.
So we then get to this Krusty bonfire that Homer has jumped on the bandwagon for, and there's some pretty funny moments here where we talk about things like, oh, they're children's toys, so this fire is going to go fast, be careful. Things of that nature. All the town is amazed as like the bonfire just goes up in flames. That was redundant. But regardless, the only person in town left defending Krusty's honor is in fact Bart.
Well, I think we need to establish that Bart has already made the notion before this that he believes Krusty's innocent.
Oh yeah, the entire episode Bart has been standing tall and saying that he believes Krusty's innocent, that he doesn't believe Krusty would do such a thing. And no matter who was saying anything, Bart was always denying it.
Well, I think it was that scene as well when Bart and Lisa are outside the courthouse and Krusty's being dragged in, and Bart actually gets to talk to Krusty for a split second, and Krusty turns around and just tells him again, which it's a smart throwback to the line at the beginning of the episode. Krusty says, "I didn't do it," but instead of being all happy and Krusty like he's so defeated and feels like miserable and he's completely broken down when he says, "I didn't do it," and it's kind of like a sweet little throwback to the earlier line.
Yeah, it was his catchphrase from earlier completely turned on its head. You're absolutely right. Big again, another huge impactful moment with just a couple of word line and pulled off and executed super well.
It did make me laugh after they rule Krusty guilty. It makes me laugh when the lawyer looks at him and says, "Oh, I knew it. This happens every time."
Yeah.
And Krusty just looks at him like, "What the fuck?"
What the hell? Yeah, totally. I agree, yeah. And only one other major kind of plot point to bring up from the trial before we move on is it is uncovered during an examination that Krusty is illiterate. He cannot even tell between the letters A, B, and C. There is a funny moment where he cries out, "Is it a crime to be illiterate?" And he's like crying. And then after they tell him what Exhibit B is, which was some sports gambling tickets or receipts, he immediately has the same line only, "Is it a crime to gamble on sports outcomes?" or something of that nature. And the lawyer is just like, yes it is. Or the judge was, yeah. So yeah, Krusty's illiterate. Krusty's charged with the robbery of the Quickie Mart. And none other than Krusty's faithful sidekick, Sideshow Bob, takes over the Krusty the Clown show.
And with you saying that, I want to interject here real quick. I think I've mentioned this a few episodes ago. I think Sideshow Bob has to be up there as one of the best, if not the best, side characters / guest stars in the entire series. The later iterations of it aren't as good as the earlier ones, but like at least the first 4 or 5 times you see Sideshow Bob in an episode just about him, oh my gosh, Kelsey Grammer is Sideshow Bob.
Oh, he so is.
Anybody else
You're absolutely right.
could do it this way. Just the way he speaks, he's got that whole Frasier attitude, and he makes Sideshow Bob so smart, but then has moments of complete idiocy where things just break him down, like when he steps on a rake and it hits him in the face. Like I absolutely love Sideshow Bob. Ever since I was a kid, every time a Sideshow Bob episode came on, I was like, everyone shut up, I'm watching this, even though I've seen it 500 times already.
It's a great character, and one of the many reasons that this episode is as strongly rated as we both rate it. Something interesting there, actually a couple things interesting there that you said. First of all, you mentioned Frasier. I just want to toss out, I love whenever they go in later seasons, they introduce Cecil, his brother, and it's also the brother from Frasier. Thought that was really, really funny. And then another thing, you mentioned who else but Kelsey Grammer could pull off Sideshow Bob. Were you aware that there was actually a name considered before Kelsey Grammer got the part?
I didn't know that, but I mean, that's typical for Hollywood. So, who was the other person?
Well, you'll like this, and it's kind of interesting. I didn't know this until I watched this episode today, and I tried to listen to the lines in this voice. And I have to say, man, this may have been the one other person that could have maybe pulled this off. Though I love Kelsey
Hopkins?
Grammer, and I think he's the right man for the job. It is none other than James Earl Jones.
Ooh.
And hearing Darth Vader say Sideshow Bob's lines is pretty fucking incredible.
Yeah, that would be a really interesting way to see it, and I mean, it makes perfect sense. Like either one of them have that same kind of pitch and everything, but I definitely feel like Kelsey Grammer can do the bravado to build himself up really high and then come back with something really stupid happening to him where it just completely breaks him down.
I agree. I think that Kelsey Grammer is able to pull off the sad clown portion of the character more than the I think that they both would have been great in the evil aspects. But at the end of the day, Sideshow Bob is a clown. I mean, he's a sidekick clown, but he's still his goal is to, or his job, I should say, is to wear a funny costume and try to make kids laugh. That's what a clown does. So.
I'm going to go ahead and draw extremely long and convoluted lines here and say that I'm going to call, because Kelsey Grammer got to do Sideshow Bob such a long time ago, he must have put the spark of cartoon voice acting into his daughter, Spencer Grammer, who, if you're a Rick and Morty fan, knows that is Summer on Rick and Morty. So
I'm a huge Rick and Morty fan, and I had no idea that they were related. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah, she's his daughter.
Oh, no joke.
She's been in a couple movies. I think she was on the TV show Greek a long time ago. I watched like the first season of that show years and years ago.
I actually watched that series, and it's the fucking worst, because I'm the type of person where if I get sucked into a series, I will watch it to the fucking end, regardless of how shit it gets.
Yeah.
And season 1 of Greek was just interesting enough to keep me hooked, and then I watched 4 other fucking seasons, and it got terrible.
Oh, I'm glad I only watched the first season then. I just never...
Oh, God.
I never thought about the show again, but I believe
Blue Mountain State is a much better version of that show.
Oh, yeah, Blue Mountain State. I need to rewatch that again. That show's fantastic. Thad Castle for life. But I think that Kelsey Grammer's daughter was like the main love interest of the main character in Greek, I think.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
I think she was like the leader of the sorority house, I believe, or something. But when I first saw her, I was like, oh, this girl's cute. And when I looked at her, I said Grammer, and then it said that she was Kelsey Grammer's daughter.
Interesting. Yeah, I did not know that, but that's a good tie-in to another great animated television show that's now
cartoon
taken
excellence
over.
runs through this family's veins. That's what we're trying to say.
That's what we're saying. So yeah, we do have Kelsey Grammer as Sideshow Bob, and he has taken over the Krusty the Clown show. We actually hear him talk a bit, and it's very clear that he wants to bring some culture and enlightenment to children's television. We also have a really great scene where he kind of goes from being out in the public eye into his office, where he transitions from being like the zany, happy, innocent guy that we to this point believe he is, up until the point where he basically admits his guilt on screen while he's by himself.
Isn't that evil laugh just the greatest thing, though? Like, the switch right at that moment when he goes into the evil laugh is so good.
It's so good, and the animation with it is also just perfect.
Dark.
Like, the transition of how it goes from him being, like, joyous to, like, evil is not, like, murderous clown evil, but, like, just mischievous bad evil.
Yeah.
Oh, man, like, so good. The laugh tied in with the animation, this establishes this character. And really, I mean, I think if you were to make, like, a GIF or whatever of one moment that would describe who... I'm sorry, I almost called him Silent Bob, but that's Kevin Smith. I meant Sideshow Bob. If you were to have, like, one moment of time that defines who's Sideshow Bob, I think you could argue that transitional moment is him, because he tries to put on one face for the public, and he always has evil intentions, and he pulls the same trick off over and over and over again.
You're absolutely right. That is the MO for Sideshow Bob there. So anyways, then he gives Bart, Lisa, and Maggie free tickets to the show when they try to talk to him about that. And I had a question when Bart, Lisa, and Maggie are watching Sideshow Bob's show. Where are Marge and Homer? These kids have been out trying to figure out stuff about Krusty for a long time now. And if my parents knew that I went to a Krusty Lou Studios lot, got tickets to a show, sat down and watched the show, and it's been hours since I last saw my parents. If I didn't call in and check in with my parents, I'd get my ass kicked.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, this was like before cell phones and whatnot, but you're totally right. They've been gone for a while, which I guess we should probably touch on that. This actually was one of the cooler parts of the show, as Richie and I spoke of earlier. Bart has been true to Krusty the entire time. He has stood by his word that that he was innocent, and he has not listened to anybody tell him otherwise, including Lisa, who had turned the corner and decided that Sideshow Bob was going to be her new favorite, and it turns out he's less condescending than Krusty is anyway. But we get Bart and Lisa teaming up, and all it took was Bart admitting that Lisa's smarter than him. And that was actually a really fun moment for Lisa. Like, I mean, it was very brief, but just going back to like kind of having their characters already set and not really having to establish, just with that being this one little moment was another really strong moment for Lisa, in my opinion, because she knows she's the smartest. She knows that Bart needs her help. She just also knows that she can get him to admit it, and
well, she
why
knows
not?
that's the hardest thing for Bart to do, which is that's kind of what he touches on when he says, "I'll never forgive you for making me say this."
You're right, it is, but I think that's also a cue to Lisa's heart in that she knows that that's the hardest thing for Bart to do. So if Bart goes to that level, he must be serious about it. This isn't just him, pulling a prank. This is him like heartfelt, convinced that he needs Lisa's help to save his hero.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So Bart and Lisa go off to do some investigating at the Quickie Mart. They discover a couple of things that more or less exonerate Krusty. That one, there's a sign next to the microwave that says if you have a pacemaker, you should not operate this machine. To which we know from an earlier scene that Krusty did in fact have a heart attack, and Lisa
bypass
verifies
surgery. Which doesn't Homer do that in the later season? Doesn't Homer have a quadruple bypass surgery?
I think he has a quadruple. Yeah,
Team Homer.
We'll find out. Regardless of all that, Lisa also ties together the fact that the criminal was reading a book while waiting to rob the Quickie store, and we know now from the court scene that Krusty is illiterate.
Aha.
And that'll bring us to the most pivotal moment of the show. After the kids receive their tickets from Sideshow Bob, which there's a funny moment here where Sideshow Bob is meeting with the lawyers, and when they find out kids want to come and meet them, they're like, oh, these contracts can wait, meet your fans, which is like said no lawyer ever. That moment made me laugh. But yeah, Sideshow Bob gives them the tickets. They go out to the crowd. They watch the show, and Bart looks miserable. Sideshow Bob brings him on stage for...
led him down to the path of his downfall here.
Oh yeah, you're totally right. He was very arrogant about this whole situation. What was the show he brought him on? He has a new segment of his show. What is it?
It was like something about Sideshow Bob Cares or something like that.
No, Choices. It was Choices.
I knew it was a C
Choices.
word, but not the C word.
Country?
Oh.
Regardless, he's on the show for Choices, and Sideshow Bob's basically asking him, like, why are you so sad, little boy? Let's turn that frown upside down. And Bart just flat out says his theory about why Krusty is innocent on Krusty's show, or on now Sideshow Bob's show. It's pretty quickly determined that through a quick moment by Bart that he realizes that Krusty has really small feet, Sideshow Bob has huge feet, and when Homer stepped on the end of the shoe at the Quickie Mart in the beginning of the episode, Sideshow Bob, or who we thought was Krusty at the time, howled in pain because he got his toes stepped on, which this actually proved Krusty's innocence, put Sideshow Bob to a position where I guess he felt that he was going to be caught, because he more or less confesses at this point.
He's the only one in the town of Springfield with big feet, so...
I guess so, yeah. I like when the cops say something along the lines of like, oh, the kids are right. How'd we miss that?
Lou's still yellow, too.
Oh, he is, isn't he? You're right. That'll change soon.
This is the scene that always got me fired up when I was a kid watching the show. The scene where Bart has his moment of aha, and he figures it out. I don't know, ever since I was a kid, that's the scene that made me love this episode. Because, you feel so bad for Bart because he wants to prove Krusty's innocence, and he's not getting anywhere. And when he finally tells Sideshow Bob everything him and Lisa have discovered, Sideshow Bob has convincing reasons why that doesn't mean anything. Why someone could that Krusty doesn't listen to doctors, so he could still use something where a pacemaker wouldn't allow you to use it. Or, there are pictures in this magazine that you can look at, even though he ironically holds up the exact magazine that Bart was talking about.
Well, I thought it was kind of damning that he was so familiar with the magazine they were referring to.
It's because he's being arrogant, like I said.
Yeah.
He's not dotting all his I's and crossing all his T's, which is always the downfall of Sideshow Bob. He always over plans but then misses things that he should be easily not do. Like, don't let Bart talk you into singing a song when you're floating down a boat and you're trying to kill him. And
I love the Cape Fear episode.
But
and then the thing with the dam too, with the explosions, I think Bart's able to distract him with his arrogance at that point
well,
too.
Damn the explosion, that was actually his brother was the bad guy. Sideshow Bob actually saved Bart in that one.
Yeah, you're totally right. I think I was thinking of the blimp actually.
Oh, yep. I love the dam one though.
Yeah, the damn one's really good.
Yeah, it's his brother gets Sideshow Bob to start yelling crazy things at the cops at the end, so they arrest him. I love that. But anyways, on this one, when Bart finally has that realization where he knows what the issue is, and he points out the thing about the feet, it's such an awesome moment. You feel so vindicated for him, and that's why I always connected with this episode. It felt so good for Bart.
I think boys our age at the time, Bart was somewhat of a role model for all of us. I've said wholeheartedly he was one of my biggest idols when I was a kid. So whenever you see him have the heroic moments, it's a real feel-good thing for a kid, and it still connects with me to this day.
Absolutely.
So that more or less wraps it up. Sideshow Bob confesses. We get a fun moment where he's screaming at the kids. We would have got away with it if it wasn't for you meddling kids, which as a Scooby-Doo fan, you gotta love that shit. We also get some final moments with Krusty where he gets an apology from the cops that he doesn't seem to really take to, I can't blame him that he'd be upset still.
They missed the most obvious fact of the case.
Yeah, definitely. And then we also get an apology from Homer. He says, "I'm sorry I fingered you in court. I hope that all the terrible rumors about what happens to people in prison aren't true." And then we get a somewhat touching moment where Krusty says aloud, "There is always one little boy who stood by him," and he bent down and he shook Bart's hand, and then we transition to where we get an autographed picture to his best friend Bart from Krusty, where Bart is putting that up on his wall and going to bed in his room full of Krusty merchandise that was previously taken from him for the bonfire.
That's gotta all be worth a lot of money now too, since everyone burned everything else.
Right. I'm thinking Krusty probably personally hooked him up was the impression that I got here, because I don't know, the Simpsons seem to just drop money like it's hot, but I got the impression that this was Krusty standing tall for his friend.
I completely disagree with you, and I'm going to tell you why right now. Krusty always forgets who Bart is.
Yeah, but this was immediately after.
I know.
I agree later in the episodes, but I think this was his reward, and then he just goes on to be like, oh, whatever.
No, I think it's just it makes more sense to me, metaphorically speaking, that Bart is the only one that didn't burn everything. I know Homer threw one of his dolls into the fire, but I feel like Bart, being the hooligan that he is, had a lot of Krusty stuff stashed away. But either way.
Fair enough. That I like that theory. That's a good theory too.
Krusty always forgets who Bart is. He even points out, "I saved you," or I found out Sideshow Bob was framed you. I'm the one that saved your life," and he always says stuff like that. And Krusty's like, "Eh?"
Yeah, that's true, and that's sad actually. Oh man. But yeah, so this was a damn good episode. I don't think it's going to be surprising here in a moment when we rank the 13 episodes that's going to be high for both of us. Do you have anything else, or does your book have anything else to say about Krusty Gets Busted?
The guide actually only had 3 notes in it, and it was really, I didn't like the notes they had. It's stuff that was blatantly obvious in it, except for the one note they did have when they were talking about Krusty. Krusty and Elvis have a connection because it says the town that Krusty got his start in, which I'm gonna botch this. I'm not a huge Elvis person. I like Elvis, but I don't know jack about him. But it's Tupelo, Mississippi, I think, which is where Elvis got his start as well. So that's kind of a cool little connection.
Huh, interesting.
And the last personal note I have is, rewatching these episodes, it's so obvious throughout the entire episode. After knowing the outcome of it, they show Sideshow Bob's feet all the time throughout the entire episode, almost like a slap in the face, where this is what you're supposed to be focusing on. And I noticed that watching it today, that they pointed out so many times without saying a word, where you're supposed to make the connection already. And even as a younger kid, I didn't realize the foot part until Bart did, which I think, again, just shows you how great the show was, especially this particular one. It's just it was awesome. I just didn't notice how much they showed Bob's feet throughout the epised until I rewatched it.
And they also really made a point to not only focus on whenever Homer stepped on his toe in the Quickie Mart, they really, really overshowed. They made a point to make sure it was very, very obvious what happened. And then later on, when they're going through like clips of the, I think it was in the courtroom, they were going through like still shots. One of the still shots was Homer standing on Krusty's toe.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were absolutely painting, like, I mean, this was very much so, even more than like a Scooby-Doo episode, a solvable mystery for the watcher at home, which makes it even that much more intelligent. You're dead right.
Yep. They throw it in your face, but in a subtle way.
I think that's going to do it for Krusty Gets Busted. But before we finish up with season 1, we did something I found very challenging. Richie the WIzKid over there says was easy, but fuck him. We ranked all 13 episodes. We ranked all 13 episodes, and we are going to put them in order from our least favorite, counting down to our favorite, starting with 13. For 13, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised by either of our selections. But Richie, what did you have in spot 13?
I've said this out loud numerous times. My least favorite episode of the season is the last one, which was supposed to be the first one, Some Enchanted Evening.
Some Enchanted Evening for me as well. I don't think we need to say anything more about that. In the 12th spot,
the one where Homer loses a job, Homer's Odyssey. Didn't do a whole lot for me. Didn't feel like a complete episode.
I'm completely with you. I also have Homer's Odyssey, so far we're in tune with each other. I have a feeling this is where we're going to get traded off on 11. Go ahead and share what you put for 11.
My 11th episode was Life on the Fast Lane, where Marge almost cheats.
Holy shit, dude! Me too. No
bullshit.
Really? Yeah, we are 3 for 3 so far. I am also with you on Life in the Fast Lane. I think overall there was a lot I liked about the episode. In particular, the improvisation by Al Brooks as Jacques. But ultimately, man, like just like the whole concept upset me. I don't know. Like I don't like the idea of the Simpsons cheating on each other.
Didn't you say Matt Groening said that's one of his most favorite episodes like ever?
Yeah, it is.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. For me, it didn't do a whole lot for me. Outside of the whole cheating thing, it just wasn't a Marge-centric episode is never really going to be a top episode. Now, later seasons start to get a little bit better. There's a couple that almost make it into top episodes, but it's a Marge-centric episode, and that doesn't do a lot for me.
Right on. Well, let's see if we keep this going at your number 10 spot.
To make this fair, we have not read our list to each other. This is the first time we're
No, this is the first time for sure.
So we're on episode number 10.
Episode number 10.
Frankly enough, was the 10th episode, Homer's Night Out.
I am also at Homer's Night Out, dude. This is awesome. Wow, we're very in tune right now. No, we have nothing to argue about. Homer's Night Out, a fine episode, not a bad episode, an interesting episode with Bart's going around to the strip clubs. But ultimately, same concept. I mean, just the tension that was put between Marge and Homer. For one, I thought the placing of these two, because these two also fell side by side with each other in the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that one also was my number 10 spot. You know what? Let's flip this up just because I don't want people to think I'm just mimicking you. Maybe this'll I'll do the next couple. I'll go first here. For the number 9 spot, I went with Simpsons roasting on an open fire, the pilot episode.
I knew you were gonna do that. I did not do that one, by the way. I did call the Simpsons on this one. It was an episode that did not stay in my mind the way I remembered it.
Call of the Simpsons actually moved up as I thought back on it, but I think a lot of it is nostalgia, even though I just recently watched it. I just always loved the adventure of that episode. For mine, the Simpsons roasting on an open fire, I like this episode. I think it's a good Christmas special. I love the addition of Santa's Little Helper, but ultimately it's just average. I don't think it's, that's why it kind of falls in the lower mid part of the list. It's not really... It didn't stand out, and there was still not enough established of who the Simpsons were to really have that heartfelt connection, especially for a holiday episode. It's kind of risky to start with a Christmas special.
I can see that. All right, so what'd you have at your number 8?
For number 8, I went with a recent episode. I went with The Crepes of Wrath.
All right. It was actually the starting with the last one we did, and this one and then the next two were the 4 I had the most difficult with, and I feel like we're going to have the same 4 in that general ballpark. I actually went with Bart the Genius on this one.
Okay. I'll go ahead and spoil real quick and we'll talk about them both. I did Bart the Genius at number 7, so we're very, very close there. So Crepes of Wrath, if you forgot, is the one where Bart's a foreign exchange student. He goes and he becomes a wine slave. Meanwhile, the Simpsons house a terrorist. And while Bart the Genius is the one where he swaps test with Martin. Martin. Yeah, Martin.
I almost said Milhouse too. That'll never happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the one where he swaps tests with Martin. Everyone thinks he's a genius. He goes to a genius school. Turns out he's not a genius, and, it all unravels at the end. So I could see that's what you said you had at number 8, and what did you have for your number 7?
7 for me was actually Simpsons roasting on an open fire.
Okay, so we're a little bit more removed at this point, but we're still right in the
We're in
same
the same
ballpark
wheelhouse.
with one another.
What was your number 7? Did you
Totally.
say 7 for you?
Totally. 7 for me was the Bart the Genius.
All right.
So we'll go ahead and I'll do number 6, and I'll let you start out the top 5. Number 6 for me was No Disgrace Like Home.
Oh, wow. Really? Wow. Okay, that's where we're going to have our biggest.
That one started higher on the list today and moved down this morning.
Dang. All right. Well, my number 6 was actually Crepes of Wrath. That one always had a fond spot in my heart, and even though it didn't play as well as I remembered it to, it's when Bart triumphs, when he learns something and more or less saves the day. I always like those episodes. So that brings us to the top. We're down to our top 5 now, right?
We sure are. Go ahead. What's your number 5 spot?
Number 5. For me, it's tough putting a Lisa episode this high, but I went with Moaning Lisa.
Interesting. I actually went with Call of the Simpsons for this one.
All right.
Which we talked about a little bit, but that's just because of my love for the adventure of it. Number 4, what'd you go with?
Bart the General.
I too had Bart the General at number 4. Number 3.
Mine is Telltale Head.
I'm with you on the Telltale Head. Very solid episode and easily made the top 3. That's actually one of the ones that bumped things down earlier because I kind of forgot about it when I was making my list and realized that wasn't going to work out. I think I'm going to surprise you at the number 2 spot. You go ahead and give us yours.
Well, I imagine I know what yours is because I haven't heard you say it yet.
Yeah, most likely we can figure it out at this point.
Yeah, my number 2 was There's No Disgrace Like Home. There's just something about... obviously, I went off on a big tangent in that one about how I feel like it's Homer trying to unshrekify his family and then realizing that it's okay to be Shrek before Shrek.
And I love the idea of that episode as a solo episode. I just feel it fits awkwardly in the Simpsons universe because of a lot of the decisions they make as characters. And I understand that's largely to do with the fact that they just weren't really fleshed out characters at the time. But I just, there's a lot of the earlier stuff that I didn't like. I do love the iconic scene where they're shocking the fuck out of each other at the end.
That's the part that sealed it for me was the scenes with Dr. Marvin Monroe.
Sure.
I had to put it up that high.
And I actually surprised myself with my number 2 pick when we watched through it again this time. I went with Moaning Lisa, arguably the least funny episode in the entire season, but definitely, in my opinion, the one that has the most heart amongst the Simpsons. I think that from defining roles, and it was one of the earlier episodes that I felt it was still establishing, but it also kind of found its footing. And again, as weird as it is, that scene with Marge and Lisa together just always brings it home for me. I think that's just really good stuff. And it's no surprise that leaves for both of us the best episode of the season and the one we leave you with for the end of season 1, Krusty Gets Busted.
Not much can be said about it, so.
Yeah, dude, it's a great fucking episode. You've probably seen it a dozen times. It's still good. Watch it again. So, anyway, anything else you would like to say about season 1 in general, Rich, before we get on out of here?
It should have ended one episode before it did.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's interesting that episode is what it is. It has the history, and I'm still almost frightened thinking about the idea that episode almost tanked this entire show.
We're talking about Some Enchanted Evening.
Yeah. Some Enchanted Evening was so bad that it made the producers of the show consider not doing it. So that's something to be said for it.
Thank goodness that didn't happen.
No joke. Thank goodness it did not happen indeed. Anyway, we really appreciate you tuning in to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. We hope you enjoyed Season 1 as much as we do, and we cannot wait to get back with you for Season 2 coming out just next week. You don't even have to wait. We have a very special guest lined up, author of the book Slimed, an oral history of Nickelodeon's golden age. Matthew Klickstein will be joining us to talk about the first 2 episodes of Season 2, Bart Gets an F, and Simpson and Delilah. Can't wait to have Matthew on the show. It's going to be a great time. Rich, before we get out of here, is there anything that you'd like to plug this week?
Well, as always, if you want to talk about how you hate our list or completely agree with our list, which I don't know why you do the first thing at all, you can always follow me on Twitter. I am at TheWiz_Kid23. Also, check out our movie review show that we do on YouTube on MrMostDaysOff's YouTube channel. That's called Movies in a Half Shell.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Please check out Movies in a Half Shell. That is on my YouTube channel at MrMostDaysOff. You can also find me on Twitter at MrMostDaysOff. Come and look for me there. We can talk about wrestling, we can talk about movies, or we can talk about The Simpsons, or talk about whatever you want to talk about. Please come back and join us again next week for the Best Darn Diddly Review Show.